Hello, hello, lovely people. Good to see you all here. How are you doing, Syed? Welcome, designer. Hey, Naka. Welcome, welcome. Good to see you all here. Hope you had a lovely day. Welcome, Bodhi, Evelyn, McFall, Sheila. It's good to see you all here. Let's switch things on up. Slightly different camera angle today. A bit more head-on, which I do like, even though it's like fucking triggering me that it's slightly off angle. Dang it. No, I focused. Dang it. Oh, got me being professional and all that. Hello, Atakan. Welcome, welcome. Beyond Extent logo has been through some stuff. I don't even know like how long I've had this t-shirt. I think 4 years or something? It's been a while. I don't even know how the back is doing. Oh, I don't even know if there was anything on the back. Hello, Major Tom. Hello, Hendrik. Welcome, welcome. Is that a flamethrower? Yes, it is. That is, oh, this side. Far Cry 6 Collector's Edition right there. I don't know where the stand is, though. I actually don't know where the stand is. I just realized that now. Well, whoops. And I also broke a part of it off in, like, transit as well, so that sucks. But it is, yeah. So yeah, hope everyone is doing well. Yeah, this week has been... I'm sure that a lot of people can relate to this, but I feel like this week has just been really draining. But also I had the most productive week ever, I feel. So I've been having a lot of fun. Getting back into Unreal. So I was doing a medieval project like ages ago. That medieval project is back on the table. I basically ported everything to the newest Unreal Engine version. I turned Nanite on. I'm redoing the whole thing, or like basically all the assets. I'm turning everything into PCG, all that kind of good stuff. Having a lot of fun. But also that means that I've kind of been just not sleeping enough. That's what it's really coming down to, you know? Is that I don't feel like I'm getting enough sleep. Which is totally my own fault, but I'm just having so much fun working on this stuff and it's been a while since I had that moment where you like look at the time and it's like, oh shit, it's like 2 in the evening already. I need to get up to go to work. That's what I've been having the entire week, basically. So it's not something to really complain about, but yeah. Just it feels really intense, but also really fulfilling at the same time as well. So that's been my week. Vibe arting. Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily call it that. That's what the young kids say these days, you know? I just call it being in the zone. And just like where just like what you want to do with what you're currently working on just aligns perfectly. Whew. So good. It's honestly been a long time since I had that. So it's good to have it back. And I'll even ignore like the amount of sleep that I lost over it, you know? Yeah, but honestly, same old. So me and the team got together as we do on like a weekly basis yesterday. We talked about like a bunch of updates. We talked about our current workshop lineup, which actually is coming together really nicely. So this month we have, well, basically this week, we have Sarah Khan joining us for an awesome workshop on how to add movement to your environments to make it like more impressive and more eye-catchy. So yeah, Evelyn in the chat is doing an awesome job at that. And yeah, we have one workshop that we haven't announced yet, and we have two ones that are being close to being sort of nailed down. And those would be the ones for August already. So we're getting to a stage where, and this is what we discussed yesterday as well, where we are looking at like, okay, how do we become more effective at showcasing that we have workshops, right? Because right now we announce them and then we have some social media posts, but like we don't really do enough of it just yet. So I think in the coming weeks, what I'll do is I'll have a look at the calendar and like reinstating the calendar on the website and making all that cool stuff again. Yeah, just a little bit of insight there. On the course front, we have a lesson about low poly modeling that is quite close to, I think the text of it is done and currently being worked on the video. And then we also have one about foliage creation as well, which is going through the final steps for the video at the same point as well. So a lot of exciting stuff happening there too. Yeah, and I've been doing a massive overhaul on like all the resources that we're going to offer for the next team challenge. So I've been doing an overhaul on like basically all the, we call it like our own starter content because it kind of is turning into that. So we have like our own starter content pack that we give to the people that do the team challenge. So I've been improving all of that, which is gonna be cool. Yeah, but for people that are new to this stream, this is basically like a weekly stream that I do for people that are in our community. They can sign up every week to get like my personal feedback. We're gonna dive into that in just a minute. But in the meantime, if you are new or if you want to ask any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat, and then we can kind of have like a discussion about it too. That would be awesome. Atakan is coming in and saying it would be great if you have a chance to review for an environment for common isometric strategy games like Anno 1800 AoE in the future. A chance to review for an environment. I mean, so no one, it's been a while since I've seen one, but like if someone were to build that stuff in our community, I will review it. So yeah, because those kind of games, they come from like a gameplay perspective. They come with like a bunch of really interesting things that you can do to optimize them as well, right? Because obviously your camera is more restricted, so it gives you the opportunity to be more optimized, which usually needs to happen because for those kind of games, you have a lot of density that goes on compared to up close detail, right? It's kind of reminiscent to the first game that I worked on, Planet Coaster, where the focus was more on keeping the individual asset quality really, really optimized because we had to render like, I don't know, 10,000 things on the screen at once, right? So you can't put all your love into like a singular thing. But yeah, if people make stuff like that, that would be cool. Hello, how are you doing? So yeah, that was a good chance to shout out. Like, if you have any more questions, feel free to drop them in the chat as well. I do love myself some strategy games. I think, and I keep saying this, I feel that like Anno 1800 is like a masterpiece when it comes to a strategy game. I really do. Like, I feel like, yeah, just all the aspects in that game work so well together and are so well interwoven. It was just, yeah, like a beautiful, beautiful game. From like a gameplay perspective and from like an art perspective as well. I feel like I didn't really play a lot of the DLCs, but I feel like they, yeah, they did a really good job. That's a great question, Collective Soul. So any specific subject we should ask questions on? You can ask questions on, well, basically anything, but if you want to condense it down, so I'm a senior environment artist working in video games, right? So anything surrounding making art for video games, working in the video games industry, becoming an environment artist yourself, anything around those terms, or yeah, basically anything that you can think of surrounding that would be a great start. That means that we can ask when Fable is coming out. You can definitely ask, but you will not get an answer. That is for sure. In terms of RTS games, have you seen Stronghold, Crusader Z? I have not actually. I don't really play too many RTSs, so also don't take my word on like Anno 1800 being the best RTS ever. Yeah, with too much weight, yes. But yeah, I've not heard of it. And are you gonna play the new Pax Romana? I've not looked into it. Yeah. I think we glanced at the trailer because we've kind of been catching up on like all the trailers and all the video games that came out, and there's honestly there's just so much. There is just so much. Yeah, there were some like interesting things that I thought, mostly indie games that I'm really interested in. I think the biggest thing that I have is that yeah, Clockwork Revolution did look cool, even though I am not the biggest BioShock kind of fan. So I might not play it, but it did look cool. I really was interested in how far they're gonna push the mechanics when it comes to time travel, right? And how you influence time. So that, yeah, that is the thing that really interests me about that game. But yeah, honestly, like the biggest thing that I was super excited for was at the end of the Xbox showcase. They started with a trailer, and it's me and my partner sitting there watching it, and she's just going like, man, this is right up your alley. Like, this is a game that you would love to play. It had that like very intriguing, like near future kind of setting going on, and it had like a bunch of like sci-fi inspired stuff. And I was just like, oh god, this looks really interesting. And then they revealed it was a new Call of Duty, and I was like, oh, come on. I was so excited for a new IP. Ah, dang it. Well, we'll see. Maybe I'll still play it. Because I do have to say, I did really enjoy the last campaign for the Call of Duty games. So I might just play it for that reason, you know? Bamboozled, yeah. They freaking got me good. I tell you that. I was like, oh, this is probably like the best thing that I've seen from like the whole showcase, right? I'm just like, ooh, the production quality, this is looking good, this is looking refined. And then it's just like, oh, gotcha, dang it. I keep meaning to look up so many games from the PC Game Showcase. I think, honestly, that's the best way to look at the PC Game Showcase, because I don't know if I'm getting freaking old or what, but like the comedy that they do, and the ad segments and the transitions, man, I cannot deal with those. Like, they're too cringy for me, you know? I think that whole show is just like a real sign that I'm getting too old for this shit. And I'm not even that old. It is crazy. Man. Yeah, but to be fair, because I watch that show only on like a yearly basis, right? So I kind of know what I can expect from it now. But yeah, it doesn't get better. That's all I'll say about it. It's just not for me, you know? Marius is asking, what is the hardest skill to master as an environment artist? Like lighting, understanding shapes, or more technical skills? So this it's a good question. I feel it kind of depends on who you are as a person, right? But I will say in general though, like the fundamentals are probably the hardest skill to learn because they're very subjective. Whereas with a technical skill, what you can do is you can be like, hey, look, I want to learn how to bake. There is a correct way of baking. So you learn that way. Once you know how to bake that way, that's it. Your bake is going to come out good, right? Sure, you're going to have to go back and forth a little bit sometimes, but you know how to bake and that's it, right? That's the benefit about a technical skill. So you can learn how to like efficiently model like very complex shapes in Blender, for example, right? once you kind of learn how to model something complex, you've learned it, right? Where I feel like with the fundamentals, it's like you can learn them, and then what happens at a certain time is that you know the rules, and now you want to break them, right? So you're kind of going back onto yourself, and instead of like using a certain rule, you can kind of break it in a certain way where it still makes sense compositionally. So like the game just keeps going, I feel. Yeah, but yeah. So that's the benefit in a large way. That's the benefit between technical and more like artistical skills, right? Where the technical skills, they kind of have a limit. Where the artistical skills, like, they don't really, right? Because it's all subjective. And even if you can say like, hey, look, if I try to make things really clear, right? Let's say I will ask 2 people make an Overwatch style project. Those 2 things are still going to come out vastly different. And that's what I love about art. For Henrik, it's light. Yeah, I think I had a huge issue with baking for the longest time. I still don't really enjoy how like baking things by itself, unless it's like, you know, like baking onto a plane for like a trim sheet or anything like that. But doing like a unique model and like baking uniquely, ugh, nah. I would rather go out of my way and make like a really complex system where I don't have to do it than just like do the thing. Hey Beer, welcome. Oh my god, AMD, am I right? Yeah, the PC Gamer Show was just full of just like fucking AMD stuff. Oh. And I'm a fan, you know? Like I use AMD stuff. Like I'm a fan of their stuff that they're making. But it's just like, yeah, it's just so much. I hate DJ. Oh, sorry to hear about that. Hi. Vera's had a rough day of modeling, didn't make any progress. That is fine. Like, sometimes you're gonna have those days where they're just gonna feel like shit. And what is gonna happen is that subconsciously you still picked up so many skills and you just have to keep building up on it. I promise you. Like, even the most tricky things, like, they will turn out to be a good lesson in the long run. So these screws giving me some real trouble right now. Sub D screws. See, this is the thing that I won't do. Like, you will never see me modeling a screw. Well, no, that's wrong. If I need a screw, like, I'll just look for an add-on that gives me like a screw with like parameters or something like that, and I'm done. That's the way that I would do it. Each project has its own purpose, but when you look at your favorite environments, what element do you feel carries the most weight? Is it the mood, the composition, the narrative, the lighting, or something else? That is a great question. For me, it has always been... I don't know if I put like... if I put them on like a shared first spot, but it's definitely colors and composition. Like, obviously the mood is like really nice, but like if the colors and the composition don't capture my attention, like I don't care what the mood is. Because so to give some background, right? So I never did this professionally, so I never was a concept artist, but I've always wanted to be one. So I have like a bunch of like sketchbooks like back there that are just full of like little drawings that I made like almost 10 years ago now. And then I discovered 3D, and now I'm here, right? That's how I got to this in a very condensed way. But what I retained through all those years was that I had like a fundamental appreciation for art. So I would look at like very traditional art or like concept art, and I would kind of try to reconstruct how they would build their pieces, and I use that to influence my own work now. And that is, that is also why I always look at pieces as like, oh, can I break them down to like their most core fundamental thing? Can you make a sketchbook showcase? Would be interesting to see. Um, yeah, I could. I could. Storytelling and coherency up there as well, so important. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I'm just thinking, I mean, I keep hammering on about storytelling, right? So I wonder if it's in the top or not. Because I think what I'm really trying to decipher is if the storytelling is something that I subjectively like go towards, or if I consciously like make like an effort to look for that. Whereas like with colors and composition, I kind of do that on like a subconscious level now. Where with the storytelling, I'm still trying to like break it down. If that makes sense. But yeah, that doesn't mean that storytelling isn't super important. I mean, that's most of the stuff. You know, we're gonna go into like a feedback session in a bit, and you'll see that I'll bring up storytelling like a bunch. So yeah, yeah, that's a good point. Let's see. I've been playing Avowed for a bit. It has me wondering about how bigger studio structures storytelling in the pipeline. We talk about like how storytelling is important in environment art, but how does that usually work? Like for example, how much is a brief you get beforehand, or how much influence does an environment art team have on those story elements? That is a good question. So how much influence does a team have on a how much influence does a team have on the storytelling itself? We kind of do the groundwork, right? So for most developments that I've been in, like the storytelling has already been set from like a broad perspective, right? So for example, I mean, this is going to come to no surprise, right? But let's say you look at a game like Far Cry, right? The story or like the setting is always going to be like this very exotic location that always has some sort of like an uprising, rebellion, or whatever going on, right? Maybe not always, but that was the case in like Far Cry 6. So you get that as like your main background as like an environment artist, and then you also get like more in-depth like regional information, right? So for example, oh, for this region we want to do X, for this region we want to do X, and then you have that is the big regional storytelling, right? And then you go down and you drill down into the actual location that you're working on, and that location has a specific purpose within that region, within the bigger storytelling, right? So you're kind of just drilling down like multiple layers until you get to, okay, this location needs to make sense from like the location where it's at in the world, but also in terms of like the bigger part of like the whole ecosystem that it's in, right? So how can I link all that stuff up? Usually you sit down with your narrative designers or your narrative team, and you can just ask them, or they have set up like a bunch of documentation for that kind of stuff. And then when it comes to the actual day-to-day, like how you translate those bigger stories into like the stories that we bring to the table, you have a lot of flexibility in how you do so, right? Because if you look at my approach compared to another environment artist approach, they will tell, or they will work within that story, but they would tell it in a different way, if that makes sense. So that's a great question. Let's see, there was something else as well, right? Yeah. For example, different companies have like different ways of doing it. For some companies, that means that, oh, this location has like a brief, right? Or you have like an internal Wikipedia page, like a Confluence page or something like that, where it will literally be like, hey, look, you're working on this location. This is all the information that's there. And this is a shared document between yourself, the level design, narrative design, and all that kind of stuff, right? So you have like a shared space that you go to. For Far Cry 6, we even had a like a book that was printed, and it just had like a bunch of really cool stories in it. So I mean, we're going on like a long tangent, right? But so what happened in the beginning is that, and this happens in most of the projects, is that the team does like a scouting trip, right? If it's based on like a real world location, they go and actually scout that location and then distill that entire location down into something that they can then share with the team. For that project, the way that they did it is that we got an internal R Bible, but it was actually like a printed, fully edited book. So it was actually structured as like a book. I don't know how many pages it had, but it was like a sizable book, and it had like stories from local people. It had really interesting locations, really interesting landmarks, really interesting, just anything that you would honestly need to get to know a location from the outside, you would just have in this like fully edited, professionally like made book that was specifically made for the project. And then we would use those books constantly to have like a source of reference, which was really cool. Because if you really want to get into like the nitty gritty, most of the stuff you can find online, right? Unless it is a country that is like very secretive or doesn't really have access to like all the modern tools that we have, right? So yeah, that was really helpful there. Yeah. In Avowed, they have tiny stories all over the place, and it seems like those stories are coming from every direction in the production. It makes sense just drilling down into detail. Yeah, so like those tiny stories, like those are usually built by just like the environment artist just coming in and being like, hey, wouldn't it be cool to do this? The main thing that it depends on is the workload that you create for another discipline. For example, if I'm like, oh man, I want to have this skeleton, and that skeleton has a key, and that key opens this door. If you're talking about those things, then we're talking about like a cross-disciplinary quest or mini quest or whatever you want to call it, right? So that at that point you need to involve like more disciplines, and that might get shot down way quicker. And usually they're established before you as an artist comes in, right? That doesn't mean that we can't have an influence on it, but it just depends on like how much support it needs from the rest of the team. So for example, if we just want to do some set dressing where you can tell that like, oh, this was a couple that died in this apartment or something like that, right? We can do that in isolation because we don't need to link that to anything else. We can just do that visually, right? As long as it doesn't go into like other disciplines. See, some really good questions today. Appreciate it all. Let's see. Atakan, only reason I was eliminated. Wait, is this in context somewhere? Only reason why I was eliminated when I went for a job interview last month was probably because I hesitated when they told me they had been working all night at the office for a few days, and I made them feel it. Are you talking about like, hey, look, you don't agree with that? Because that is fine, right? That is fine. Like, a lot of people kind of forget, and I understand it, especially in this climate where there's just like not enough open positions, where you still have a say in the process, right? If you get the hint of, hey, they're working overtime and they're working their ass off, and I do not want to do that, just say no, right? There's no need to burn any bridges or anything like that. It's just like, hey, look, that's not what I'm looking for. Cool. Bye-bye. Also, another tip on this is make sure that you read the contract. You read it twice, you read it 3 times, you read it 5 times. And the thing that I do is I highlight anything in my personal copy. I highlight anything that I want to bring up, and I'll bring it up in the next meeting with them before I actually sign it. Whenever they say it's a standard document, you don't really have to read it. You have to put like extra attention to it and like read it twice. Yeah, because they can't really do anything. They can only apply social pressure when they say like, hey, look, you need to stay late. You can be like, no, not really, because that's not in the contract, right? Let's see. In big projects you've worked on, what do the seniors do versus the juniors? So, in a very general sense, seniors have more ownership, more responsibilities, and are more involved with a wider scope of the project compared to a junior. So, for a junior, that usually means that your work is going to be very limited, and you're usually going to be guided or helped with like other people, and you're going to have people assigned to you or have people help you. Versus a senior is supposed to be like, hey, you get a task and you solve it. Like there's no influence or like no one really holding your hand in that situation, right? You're expected to do the job instead of a junior. And that means that if you have to change things up, you have to do that within disciplines, you have to do that with leads, directors, whatever. You just have to take care of that job because it's your responsibility now. Whereas for a junior, you still get a lot of support and a lot of help. That is the biggest difference. And yeah, like there's different timeline expectations. For example, that goes into the same thing, right? Whereas for a junior, they might get like 2 weeks to do the same area that a senior can do in like 3 days, for example, right? Just throwing out random numbers. What makes a senior except experience? I think that's the majority of what makes a senior, though. Like that is literally it. Like to me, everything that a senior does like just comes down from having it done like 10,000 times before. Like the only way that you can kind of shortcut it is if you are, I don't know. What would be the best way of saying this? If you are really, I don't want to say intelligent, but that's probably, but that's probably the current way of saying it. It's not intelligence, but you're just way quicker to pick things up, right? If you have that inherent trait as a person, you can shortcut that whole situation. You can basically get to senior quicker because you are way smarter in the way that you get that experience, right? Where for some people, you just have to run into that wall over and over again before the lesson sticks. There are some people that just like intuitively like click with something, right? And that allows you to potentially make a shortcut to senior because you just internalize stuff way quicker. But the rest of it is just still experience. So, yeah. I would think critical thinking comes faster. Also, hello, Andrea. Yeah. Well, yeah, or you go in a small company, but then you're still gonna run into issues if you want to go to a big company, right? So, for example, you and this is where you kind of go into like, I mean, to a certain degree, the only reason why we have seniorities is just that it makes sense for like a big corporate structure, right? That's why we have seniorities, so that you can kind of get the feeling of like, okay, this person has been here for X amount of time. We kind of need to give him some sort of thing to work towards, right? Which is like really nice for like a junior to be like, oh, I want to become a senior someday, right? That is mainly it. Because I think years of experience or like titles that are relevant to what you want to be doing, right? That makes more sense. For example, you can have a lot of experience on mobile games and then transition into a AAA space, and you might be able to transition a lot of that knowledge over, but you're still going to struggle with the things that you haven't seen in compared to like a AAA space, right? And vice versa, right? It's a two-way street, as an example. Because you can basically start up your own company and call yourself whatever, right? That doesn't mean that once you do that, like a month later, you can join a company and then be like, oh. It comes with more responsibilities way earlier in smaller studios. My experience. Yeah. Because like in smaller studios, like they don't have the factor to diffuse that responsibility with more people, right? So that's why in smaller studios you just wear more hats, because that's just what you have to do. It's the same thing when you run your own thing, right? You're responsible for everything. Marketing, getting the content done, organizing the team, like setting up the website, making sure that the website is done, making sure that emails are going out. That's all you. So you can't just be like, hey, I want you to do this. So the same happens in like, small company. Let's see, there were some other questions. The last one is here from route 1. I don't think the conversation has been brought up, but have you seen Mind's Eye and what's your take on it? I have honestly not seen it. I've seen the trailer. Them calling it like a AAA Minecraft is really interesting because that just can't exist, really. If you really think about it from like a fundamental level, where you want people to build levels and all that kind of stuff, like they need to be in control of the actual creation of the assets. Yeah. The question, what is better to start with, pros and cons? Are you talking about a small studio versus big studio? Let's see, let's make sure that we don't skip any questions here, right? Because McFall is asking, did you do an internship to get started or was it straight to junior? No, so I did an internship and then that company hired me as a junior straight after. So that was Frontier Development in 2016. I think I did my internship in 2015 and then joined in like 2016, I think. Or it might have been in 2016. Let's have a look. Is there anything else? Critical thinking comes faster. Yeah. I mean, yeah, when it comes to like actually picking stuff up, like there's a whole bunch of factors that we didn't even get into, right? Like having actual curiosity for the thing that you want to do, asking questions a lot, like so many factors that come into like being able to kind of shortcut your career. I'm definitely the latter. Got to fall down 1,000 times before I get it right. Yeah, I think I am a bit of both. I think I'm somewhere like in the middle because I definitely have those moments when I'm just like, oh my god, I'm bashing my head into the wall. And I've gotten better at not doing that for a long time, but I still do it regardless. Let's see. Oh, chat bugged. Cool. That's great. Let's have a look. A bit of a vague question from Veer, but do you have any advice for modeling curves or rounded shapes? Those have been my kryptonite. It's super hard to make anything remotely rounded or curved. In those cases, use soft selection. If you're modeling in Blender, I do edit edge flow. That's a really good add-on. I use that on a daily basis. It basically comes from Maya. Maya has that built in. It's usually called edit edge flow as well. So yeah, those are the main two things. And if you want to get like a really nice flowy stuff, I would think about like doing it on a spline. Like I've done a lot of stuff with splines now. Like I tend to use that a lot as well. But that is not necessarily about making a solid object, right? I think everyone has this, like the run into wall things. Yeah. I think what you need to realize is that you are doing it, right? And that's what I'm still getting better at, is that I think I'm actually pretty good at it now. Whereas before I would just keep running into that wall, get really frustrated, and then eventually talk to someone about it. Where now I kind of run into that wall and I'm like, okay, let me push a little bit. Okay, I'm still running into the wall. Let me talk to someone. Or let me look it up, right? Let's do 2 more questions, and then we'll dive into some feedback. Or maybe 3 or 4. Okay, let's blast through a couple of these. I have a question. Do stylized assets usually require a higher poly count than realistic ones to maintain a better, more stylized shape, exaggerated forms? Not necessarily. It kind of depends on the whole workflow that you're using, right? Because realistic is now moving into the realm of nanite, and nanite has like 100 times more. 100 times more polys than any stylized asset would. Might be a city example, but yeah. Let's have a look. Got the chat working again. I think I did. Yeah. Yeah, but definitely, like, if you were to compare like very traditional low poly stuff to like stylized stuff, yeah, the way that stylized works is that the silhouette and the actual shapes are way more important than you have in realism, right? So it's completely fine to end up with like a slightly higher poly count. What is a key thing when viewing a portfolio that shows that this person has what it takes? So this is a really hard one to measure and is more like feeling based, but if they enjoy what they're doing. And I think you can really quickly tell, because usually that person puts in way more time, really goes out on the presentation, and really stresses over like the small stuff, right? So usually you can really quickly see that. Like you can open someone's portfolio and you can see that they just had fun. And that is, for me, if I were to be in like a hiring position, that would be like a huge win already. Obviously, you still need to dig into it and make sure that they're technically sound and all that kind of stuff. But the main thing that I look for is just that quality. Yeah, it's not even quality alone, right? It's just like you can just tell sometimes that a person really had fun creating this thing. Because there's a whole bunch of people who what's the best way of saying this? They make something, or like they replicate something, but they don't create something. Right? And that's what you want to look for, is the people that really spend like a lot of time being like adding into small stories, adding into small details, where some people you can just tell that they're just kind of doing it to get the job. Even though that makes a lot of logical sense, right? But like you can just tell that they're kind of going through the motions compared to some other people. Not adding their own personal touch to things. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And it's a weird one, right? Because sometimes you have someone who has a portfolio that is less well executed, technically and maybe even artistically. But I would, if I wasn't like a hiring position, which I'm not, I would still prefer to have that person that is just really into the love of creating, compared to that person who might have done a really good job, but they didn't go the extra mile, right? Or they didn't make it special, or they didn't make it theirs, right? How do you stop yourself from spending too much time on a project and know when to call it done? That is going to be a forever struggle, especially you're talking to a person who has been working on like a medieval project since 2021. Right? So you might be firing your question to the wrong person. No, but seriously though, usually the thing that really helps with knowing how much time you need to spend on a project is your own personal timeline. In the beginning, that timeline is really easy to measure, because it's like, hey, when do I want to get into the industry? And how much of a runway do I have, right? Both financially, or I don't know, mentally, like how long do I give myself to actually get in? And then you can kind of chop that whole timeline up into multiple projects, and that kind of gives you like a rough estimate of like how much you can spend on like an actual project, right? Of course, estimations are always gonna run crazy, so you're gonna miss a lot of them. But you're gonna get better over time with those estimations. Usually from like an emotional perspective, it's a tricky one, right? Because I do want to say if you're getting constantly frustrated working on a project. So let's say you do the work. Let's say you don't have a job yet. Are you spending all of your available time on making a project? Let's say 8 hours a day. And let's say a whole week you get up and you just want to work on something else. You have a lot of ambition to work on like a scene, but you just get up and you're like, oh, I don't want to work on this scene. If you have that constantly for like a week, that might be time to call it quits. Or at least take a break, do something else, and then see if you can reignite that passion for that specific project. So, yeah. Yeah, it gets trickier when you're in a stable position, or like, well, stable, whatever that means in games. If you're in a good position and you don't really need to do art for portfolio reasons anymore, where's the bar then? Right? Like, when do you call it quits? I feel like then it kind of becomes like, hey, what do I want to learn? Like, have I learned the thing? Cool. Dump the project, you know? Stranger is asking, as someone who has 2 degrees, one being game art development and the other one in software engineering, who's been tirelessly trying to find a job in 3D art on the side for 4 years, when do you quit? That is a very personal question. I don't have a direct answer to that. Just straight off the bat, right? I come from a personality. I have a personality that is just like, that question wouldn't even come up. And I don't think that's necessarily like, I don't think that's necessarily something to be proud of, right? I don't think that's necessarily like, oh, look at me, I'm so good because I never thought about quitting. That has definitely its downsides, because maybe I got lucky, you know? But that is a very personal question, and I don't even want to answer it, because I feel like you need to look at what you're getting out of doing art, and if you would keep doing it, even if that is not what puts like bread on the table, right? Because I'm completely fine with people getting another job and then just doing 3D art on the side, and then maybe switch careers at a certain point, right? But there's so much weight to that question that I do not want to be the person who's going to decide that for you, if that makes sense. I should not, because I might be robbing you from like the most beautiful thing in your life, which is creating art. And I don't want to do that. What you could do, a couple of action points, is talk to people who are in the industry, show them your portfolio, and show them, hey, look, this is what I've been working on for 4 years. What am I doing right? What am I doing wrong? Ask that to 10 people, collect all the feedback, see what the common points are, and action those points. So that's where I would start at least, right? Because what you want to do in a position like this is you don't want to be, and this is very general, right? You don't want to be in a position where you're so emotionally charged that you will be in that state when you make that decision. I think we need to remove emotion from the question, because realistically, what might also happen is that you might be good enough to get a job. You might be good enough to get a job. But, well, first of all, you might not be applying, which I doubt. right? Because you're trying to find a job. But it might just be that the timelines just haven't matched up yet, right? It might just be that you are ready, there's just no openings. The door is currently closed, so you can't get in. That might also be happening. Because right now, the industry is kind of just like shifting about in like a very dramatic way, right? So yeah, it's just a weird time to be looking for like an actual job in the industry. But yeah, talk to 10 industry professionals of a thing that you want to be in, right? So you're here doing like an environment art stream. So I would talk to 10 environment artists that are really well known or like have some sort of like public presence. Talk to them. Ask them the simple question like, hey, here's my portfolio. If you can spend like half an hour or 20 minutes or something like that, give me 3 good things, 3 bad things, and then just collect all that data and see how you can action on that. And then do that every 6 months with like maybe the same people if they're willing to do that, or different people. Because from another perspective, you applying to jobs in the industry is actually also testing the water at the same time, right? So you're currently like just throwing your art around and then seeing who bites, right? And then if no one bites at a certain point, you kind of have to be like, okay, cool, I'll just hunker down and do more stuff, right? Or see, or like get external data. Maybe it's not the stuff that I'm making, but it's just the opportunities that are not there. That's a good question. How would you go about learning sci-fi environment art? Sci-fi environment art is all design. If you want to do that, learn how to design stuff. Have fun with that, because that's like a whole thing by itself. Let's see. I love the medieval streams. Yeah, I would love to redo them, but I feel like I need to get like a capture card or something like that, because my PC is genuinely not strong enough to run like my scene right now and then also stream it at the same time. That's great advice. I struggle with worrying about spending too much time, so it's helpful to hear how others deal with it. Yeah, usually time is not the issue, as in like, so here's my opinion on this, right? Like whenever you're investing time into yourself, whether you showcase that or not, you're still learning a bunch of stuff, right? And that's also the reason why I do art personally, because I'm putting stuff into the world, but that is that thing that I put out into the world is also so powerful in teaching me about the stuff that I'm interested in, or like it's just very self-reflective. That's why I love doing art as well. Hey, welcome, Marcus. Thank you so much for subbing. That's awesome. Going on to the question, but with more wider degrees may focus on smaller studios. They need people who know a wider field, or just try to focus on different industries, not especially game art. Oh yeah, I would try to do anything 3D related. I would not discriminate in terms of team size, products that they work on, or whatever, right? I would literally, there's like multiple game art maps. The UK has one. You know what I did to get my first job? Like, it has like dots, right? And beneath those dots, if you click on one, it gives you like all the local studios. I literally went through all of it for the entirety of the UK, and I applied to every single one. And if that didn't work, what I did is I tried to connect to people that worked at those studios, and I would just ask them politely, like, hey, I've been trying to reach out. Is there something more that I can do? Or could you possibly let me know if there's like any job openings, right? I think in that case, what is also a good tip is, and this is the reality of game art, like don't restrict yourself, whether it comes to the job application, the seniority, even if it's a senior position, just apply. You know why? Because sometimes what might happen is that they know that you're not senior, you're ready, but they might have an internal position that might open up soon, that is not available yet. And then you might just happen to be the first one in the line, right? So that might also happen. What was I saying? So yeah, don't restrict yourself when it comes to location. You can, and that is totally your choice, right? But you have to realize then that you are playing on like a way smaller playing field, right? Again, totally fine. That's everyone's personal decision, right? And everyone's personal life. But the reason why I got my first job is because I moved countries, right? If I didn't do that, then highly likely I might not be doing games right now. Let's see. Nart Memes is saying if your industry target is for games and you create really good assets that is not low poly game ready, like an asset with ornaments, for example, will the employers accept you to get in? Usually an employer is not going to make a decision based on like a singular asset. But you're more talking about like broader examples on like making low poly game ready stuff. Yeah, you need to make your art game ready if you want to work in a game industry. That is literally what you're going to be doing. And what that means is that if you are in the job market right now, there's literally thousands of other people that can do that exact thing. And it's just easy for a company to just be like, we'll hire them instead. That's what it comes down to, right? Or the other thing is that your art is so above anything that's already out there that you stand out purely on the art itself, and then they'll hire you through that. And that's also a way to get in. I will say that's highly unlikely. And maybe there might be a third one where you might be local and they just need someone and they don't offer a relocation fee. That might also happen, right? But like we're getting down to like smaller percentages. The fire of creation, I guess. Yes. Me in the mechanic industry. Yeah, my all of my friends are mechanics. Well, not mechanics, but like they all work in trades. So I get it. I get it. Hey, coffee mug. Still a monster though. All right. Hello, Marcos. Welcome. We are gonna get started. So thank you so much for all the questions. If you have any more questions, or for people that are new to the stream, feel free to drop any questions in the chat. Anything about environment art, working in games, anything like that, feel free to drop it in the chat. But yeah, thanks so much for all the questions already. I think it's time to get into some actual feedback. So let's have a look. Let's have a look at the community. Where are we going to begin today? Let's see. Let's start with Alexis. We're just going to go random today. So Alexis is saying, it's been a while, but I'm back on working on this project again. I wanted to add multiple screenshots to the scene instead of a single one. That is cool. I do have some concerns with the foliage, as I only have one type. Should I add a different grass type, a bush, or leave it as is, given the arid environment? So I added a couple of examples here where I think you could definitely add more, or even get more variation out of the current one, right? So I added like a couple of examples here, which could be cool. Stereotypical thing could be having like some dead grass kind of stuff, right? I think that always looks like pretty cool. What you could literally do is you could potentially reuse this stuff, remove the leaves, kind of turn it brownish, and add the density, right? So you just have like little tufts of like dead stuff. That is probably the easiest way of doing it, right? When it comes to this stage, I'm always like, okay, cool. What can I reuse, right? That's what I want to focus on. So we can replace this texture with a variant, right? And then also the previous thing is that we can just add like bigger tufts of grass and then have like a smaller one next to it. And maybe multiple ones. You want to give yourself like a little bit of flexibility and especially variety, right? Material instance of grass, so different shaders can be used for variation. Yep, that would be one way of doing it. You can even look into the speed tree color variation node, which could help there as well. That's an easy way to get like some micro variation. But for this one, we just, yeah, I think getting another variation. The easiest thing is definitely this, right? Like doing this is definitely the easiest thing. What I would then do is potentially have a look like this. Replace the texture with something else, and then you can have like a different bush. But yeah, I think when it comes to your question here, I do have some concerns about the foliage as I only have one type. And whenever you're asking yourself these sort of questions, I have like a little framework here where those questions usually come from our gut telling us, right? So what I usually do in those situations is like, would it be nice to have more? Okay, so that's the idea, right? Like, would it be nice? Or like the question. So I guess it could be an idea or a question. Then I'll look at references and then I can execute or not, right? It's a very simple framework, but that's what I usually use when I'm like, something is bothering me or I have this idea. I look for references, verify if that is a thing that actually exists or is done, and then I just execute on it. Right. The next question was something about the rocks, actually. So Stranger said, lovely rocks. I think that is definitely true. Some really nice looking rocks. Well, let's see. I would like to have some feedback on the mountains. Is there any to give? So yeah, I think on the mountains, we do need to play around with the scale a little bit more. Or even have like bigger surfaces. I kind of want to see more variation. Because right now, what is happening, and I don't have another way of saying this, but it kind of just looks like it's like a stack of poop. And I don't mean this in like a super offensive way, right? But that's the first thing that actually came to my like freaking crazy artist brain. It kind of just looks like a big stack of dino poop or something like that. And that just comes from, we have like a lot of these layers, right? And they're very repetitive. And I think if we can just break that up and just be like, hey, look, we're going to have like a big chunky rock down here. Cool. And then we have like some layers here. Cool. And then a big chunky rock. And then like another couple of layers up here. You can kind of even see from like this really quick example that I sketched is that we're getting like more variation. And it becomes interesting to kind of have a look at it. Right? So that's what you want to do. And that is literally just playing around with the scale, right? Like just little bits of scale variation where you can just actually scale things up and down and kind of make use of what is already there. Because I'm assuming that this is just like rocks bashed together, right? Which is completely fine, by the way, right? But that gives us a lot of flexibility to then work with those scales and build something like more interesting than we currently have. So yeah, that is what I would do. And then really vary up the shapes as well, right? So we can kind of have like some more interesting shapes. But this all depends on what you can basically do with the kit that you've made, right? Like at this point, the kit is basically what restricts you. So just, I mean, restrict you in like a good way, right? So yeah, play around with those shapes. if you can find some interesting variation in the rocks as well. What I do like is that you do have like those like layers, right? And I do like the way that they kind of create like some of this movement, which is really cool. If we just like simplify some of these areas, maybe like we can really like hone in on those. Evelyn is saying, with any desert environment, my instinct would be to add some cacti or small desert shrubs. Yeah, like either something like this, but like cacti is actually pretty interesting as well. Little cacti, like those little chunky ones with like the flower on top. You can even call my drawing a flower. It looks more like a pot. Okay, I'm gonna deal with it. I'll stop myself. Dang it. Let's see. Anything else? Additionally, for the hieroglyphs, I created decals since it's much easier to maneuver them. Any thoughts on that? That's perfect. I mean, whatever is the most flexible way of doing it for you, that works. Additionally, what you can do is you can do mesh decals, which is basically taking the stuff that you already have, but then embedding it into the mesh if you know that you're not gonna change them around a lot, right? And that has the benefit of just needing to maneuver less pieces in the environment. So that means that like wherever you have like a big wall with hieroglyphs, it's already going to be embedded in it. And that would actually just be a plane on top of your geometry, right? But nothing wrong with using decals. I think that is completely fine. Talking about decals, I'll add one little tip here. I want to see more sand buildup. So you have these like sections where you do like little piles of sand. I kind of just want to see like some sand like caked on the wall itself, right? You can do that with probably the easiest thing would be to do vertex painting. Honestly, you have the texture, right? Because we can literally take like the landscape texture, maybe add like a different mask and just like vertex paint it on top of like all the architecture that you have. You just make it into your master material and you just add it as like a paintable layer. And that gives you the flexibility of just being able to paint wherever you need like a bit of sand. That could look really cool. And that's gonna make everything tie together as well. The same thing with the rocks, like having them blend together with the same technique. Well, you could use the same technique, or you could use RVT, runtime virtual texturing, which basically allows you to blend assets with the terrain. Like Evelyn is saying, RVT. Yes. The reason why I'm not suggesting RVT on these areas specifically, even though you might even have it, it's just not blending enough. The reason why I'm not suggesting it on those vertical surfaces is because RVT is a technique that basically projects down a 2D texture onto your mesh. So that means if you have vertical meshes, it is not going to be looking that good because it's basically just straight projecting it down and it's going to be smearing across the surface. So that's why in that case, if I already know that you're going to run into issues with that, there's potentially ways that you can avoid it, but honestly, vertex paint is so much easier to set up. So yeah, great stuff, Alexis. This is coming along like really nicely. I like the style of it as well. So really, really cool to see this come together. Looking forward to seeing like all the statues and all that kind of stuff be done too. Cool. Nice one, Alexis. Thank you for sharing your work. It's looking kick-ass. Now we're gonna move on to the next person. Where's my Discord? Oh, there it is. I'm gonna confuse myself so hard by scrambling this. Let's go to Vasia next. So Vasia is working on this really cool like underground clinic, and is saying, I'm close to finishing this project. I would like to ask some advice on the props. Maybe something that seems wrong with their placement. Yeah, so the prop placement feels good, right? Like it doesn't feel like there's like you have like certain areas that are like nice and cluttered, right? So you have like nice clusters happening, which is always nice to see. You have like a cluster here and all that kind of stuff. The thing that I felt that was kind of missing is you have these beautiful areas where you do like small bits of environmental storytelling, right? For example, having this stuff in here. Don't forget to sterilize the knife this time. It's just, it adds a bit of character, right? So like these little post-its, they're really good. But they should be seen as an addition to the main story, right? So what I'll do here is I want you to have a look at your environment and ask this question. And I want you to focus on not the story that you have in your head, but the story that you can see, right? So we need to turn our brain off because obviously we've made this. So we spent so much time thinking about the scene. But what I want you to do is actually look and distill what is happening in the scene. Because from my perspective, I think there's a lot of opportunity here to actually infuse more specific storytelling into the scene. Because for now, we have a really good setting, right? We have the general setting, but I don't know, for example, why is this here? Like, why is this here? Who was here? Who was here? Like, where is the person now? Right, and I'm purposely keeping all these questions like very, very broad, right? Because you can hone in to like any aspect. For example, you have this bucket that is filled with like gross, disgusting stuff, which gives me a hint at like what happened. It's definitely not a safe environment to be in. It's definitely not set up by the government or anything like that, right? But then I would want to know, okay, so if there's some sort of like shady business happening here, what is the purpose of that business? Right? And it kind of needs to be clear from sort of the get-go, or there needs to be like a lot of hints at it. Because also what I'm thinking is that with this amount of just gross stuff happening here, I would expect to see lots more blood on the chair and then potentially dripping down as well, and then just like collecting at the bottom, right? Meat bucket is a star of the show, can't look away. Yeah, but it kind of feels like the Mr. Meat Bucket doesn't have a lot of context, right? It's like, okay, like we have this very specific area that is very gross, but then the rest of the scene is like, oh, it's okay. It's kind of weird that it's in this position, but it's okay. Nothing bad is happening here, right? So I would really play into that and kind of keep it like, okay, if there's really, let's say there's like an illegal organ harvesting thing going on, right? Like I would expect to see more indications of where the bodies end up, what types of organs they're harvesting. Maybe there's like indications of like organs are always transported in like a special case on ice, right? So maybe we can have like a couple of those cases like stored away with like some little post-its on it to be sent somewhere, right? Like stuff like that we can get like a deeper understanding of the story that's happening here. And again, I know that you're near done, right? So what I really want to put an emphasis on is I want you to focus on the assets that are easy to execute on. Kowalinsky Vasil, hey, welcome. So I can add, for example, a blood trail from the chair towards the stairs, telling that the patient ran away. Okay, so for example, if you wanna indicate that the patient ran away, then okay, so let's say you want to do that, right? Then you could have like a lot of blood happening here, and then just have like footprints going on here, and then kind of just like indicating that there's like blood dripping down here as well. Because what I want to see then is I want to visually be able to see that this person jumped down, ran through the middle of all this stuff, and then just straight up like the staircase, right? That's what we want to see. But then what I want to see is the effect that that person had on the environment, right? So these screens, they're gonna be like at least rotated to the side, because this guy was just like climbing over everything, just trying to get out. So this screen is gonna be tilted. This chair might even be like underneath here, right? Like kicked over even. There's like a bunch of blood on under here, and like these books, they might even be like strewn about, right? Because what I'm really trying to drive home is that for every bit of storytelling action that happens, there needs to be a consequence to the scene, right? So that's why I'm really trying to drive this area home, so that we get like, we see here, cool, so this is our first point of contact in the scene, which is like, okay, what the hell happened here? This looks gruesome. And then once we start doing like a deeper investigation, this is like our second part where we can see like, oh, okay, it's not only like the doctor's office here. That person also tried to run away, right? And then you can kind of continue like the trail going all the way there. Or maybe, yeah. Yeah, but that would be a good example. Maybe add a body on the chair, cover it with tarp. I don't... You could. Well, no, I'm going to leave it to you. I'm going to leave it to you, Vasil. Because it's your scene, right? Whatever you can do, basically whatever sort of story that you want to set up, right? Whatever you have in your mind, you can kind of do the same sort of thought process, right? If that person is going to be underneath the tarp, still under the chair, then you can kind of imagine that the operation is still going on, and that we see, for example, next to it, we see like freshly harvested organs or something like that, right? So whatever you decide to do, I still want to see the storytelling kind of revolve more around it, but the choice is yours. Maybe the acids behind the fallen over due to struggling with the doctor or something? Yeah, exactly. Like, you can... That's the stuff that I want to see, right? Like, whatever happened, I kind of want to see why it happened and how it happened. Visually, right? Because, yeah. Every story is basically... Let me see if I can kind of condense it down, right? Yeah, my cute. Maybe some bloody footsteps on the floor. I think that's a good thing to have in there. But if we were to say, okay, we always start from the story, right? I keep hammering this down. The story, and then you pick like your most important points, right? Like, what do you really need to, or what is the focal point of that story going to be? Right, and with focal point, this is gonna get somewhat confusing, because I'm not talking about the visual focal point. I'm talking about like the... Oh wait, let me write this instead. So from that story, we want to capture a highlight. What is that highlight? Once we kind of figure that out, we can then support that highlight by adding additional stuff. So that is like additional mini stories and also thinking about the cause and the effect of something. Cause and effect is super important in any story because it's basically, oh, this happened and then this was the cause of that. Or, oh, this chair fell down because this guy wanted to escape. Or the tarp is over the body because the doctor had to kind of run away in the middle of like an operation for something, right? Whatever story you try to come up with, like you can kind of support it with whatever visual storytelling that we're trying to do. So yeah. Let's see. Next question. I plan to use the screenshots to showcase the project. Should I use a shot with a table with the lamp, or does it look good enough? I think you can make it good enough. I would definitely think about potentially increasing some of the contrast, because I want to see more with the lamp, and probably add a bit more chaos, so that you can have like a couple of research papers and he's like taking notes and there's like a bunch of like post-it notes. Because this area here is a good showcase for your character. Even though your character is not there, we can use this stage as like, hey, I want to show more stuff about this person. If that person is like a very well-intentional person, you can highlight the OCD by having everything like neatly aligned, right? You can go that way. You can also go like, oh, crazy scientist kind of person, and he's just like scatterbrained, has like thousands of post-its everywhere, and like there's a bunch of books and they're all just like stacked and overpiling, right? Like, again, whatever you decide to do, you can portray that visually and you can kind of sell it by just being like, okay, this is the person that's behind all this and this is what kind of person they are. And then we can distill that into, okay, what makes a scatterbrain person? What would you expect to see from them? And really infuse that with a lot of character. And again, I think you have like a bunch of really cool assets in the scene already. I think with minimal effort, you can make a bunch of really cool stuff. Cool. Thank you for sharing your work, Vasia. Great looking stuff. Let's swiftly move on to the next one. Let's go with Evelyn for this one. Let's see. Evelyn's working on this cool tattoo box. Gonna get some feedback on the glass and whether you think my tweaks improved the color grading. I think on the color grading, I think we're definitely going in the right direction. I think not even the direction. I think that's really good. I would potentially still think about like how far you can potentially push it for like your thumbnail, right? Like maybe you can exaggerate it, but honestly, let's see what's gonna happen with the table and all that kind of stuff in play, because that might also require a bit more balancing potentially. For now, I think, yeah, shining way better, so looking really cool. You could potentially still play around with some bloom, right? Like get some like nice shiny highlights going on. Maybe, do I want to say? I want to say lens flares, but that's not what I want to say visually. But just a way to like showcase like the shiny sparkly stuff that just like highlights it like nicely. That's basically what I'm looking for, right? Whether it's bloom or it's whatever you can do to highlight that more. But that's more post-processing, right? And then on the glass, so I think you really did a good job on getting the Fresnel to work, right? So the edges read like really nicely. I think the thing that I'm missing is the actual volume that is the actual glass inside, right? Because we go from like a nice highlight on the edge to nothing in the middle, which it kind of gets rid of, oh, it actually feels like glass, right? So I'm kind of expecting something more like this, where you have that like nice highlight. I know we're looking at a bunch of pixels here, but you have that like nice highlight, and then you still have a core in the middle. So that's probably going to mean that potentially I want the core to be more like the highlight, and then accentuate the highlight accordingly, right? Yeah, like a little glint, more prominent highlights. Yeah. Yeah, that stuff is mostly during post, right? Like you can really play around with it. So yeah, that's what I would say. So a more solid core. And then balance the Fresnel accordingly. What you might also have to do, don't actually know. Because yeah, glass, you have to get like good looking reflections, right? So I would give like an HDRI a try, and that is basically only for the glass so that we can get something reflecting into those surfaces. I would definitely give it a try, because it seems like can't really tell. You can kind of tell here, right, that there seems to be like somewhat of an environment. Obviously it's faked, but like you can tell that somewhat of an environment is kind of just being cast into it, which does help with reflections a lot. So if you have an HDRI already, maybe start playing around with another one, or look into the surface response properties. I think I sent you like a link for that before, but I think you might need to do some deeper digging into how to get oh, actually, I think there's a tick box in your project settings that allows you to capture high resolution reflections. You might have to tick that on, if that's still a thing. I'm not sure. Yeah, but that's a question mark. I'm not sure how that works, because it's been a while since I looked at like high res screenshot, not screenshots, high res reflection specifically. Yeah, you might have to. Yeah, you might have to do that. Kind of play around with like different ones. I mean, to be fair, so I don't know how to do this out of the box, right? But there must be a way where you can just say like, hey, look, I don't want this HDRI to actually affect the lighting. I only want to be using this for reflections. Because I don't care about changing the whole lighting, right? Because then we need to like rebalance the whole thing again. I would be curious if you can have it only affect reflections. Like have it not reflect lighting is really easy, right? But like I wonder if you can still get it to only affect reflections. But yeah, thank you for the question. This stuff is looking really cool. So great stuff, Evelyn. Yeah, looking forward to the next little update. Nice. Yeah. Thanks for the feedback. No worries. Thank you for sharing it again. McFall, let's do let's have a look at your stuff. Okay, we got some references. Oh, sorry, David. I still have your image up. Let's talk about you first, then, and then we can jump into McFall's work. Sorry, McFall. Let's see. Oh, but David, you didn't. I don't think you asked any questions. So let me read through it. So I like to create two distinct scenes within this environment. One is yellow lit, where maintenance work is actively taking place, right? So that is basically the stuff in the back, right? No, sorry, McFall. We'll do after this one, I promise. And the other one is a white lit section set up to be a small loading and unloading zone, with crates, trolleys, and a subtle sense of movement suggesting ongoing operations. I want to use lighting to create contrast between the two scenes and use cables and pipes to guide the viewer's eyes throughout the environment. Okay. What can I help with? Because I mean, that all sounds good to me, you know? That sort of makes sense to me as well. The environment looks way more interesting already. You know, from what we had a look at before, it was looking, yeah, this is looking way more interesting. We even have like some subtle like height variation here, which always helps. Is it because of the dad joke in your whip Wednesday description? Huh? Dad joke? In my whip Wednesday description? What? Oh no. Did I make a dad joke? No. I gotta check this out now. McFall made a rock pun, I think. Oh no. Let's see. Yeah, I mean, this stuff is looking cool. You can do a lot with these cables. I think when you want to do some of this cable work, right, I would definitely try to make sense from it from like a not necessarily mechanical, because I feel like that's too deep, right? I feel what I kind of want to see when it comes to this is, okay, they're working on this section. We've got like some sci-fi ladder stuff going on, you know, and then we've got like all the cables coming out, and then this panel, let's say this panel is, oh, like open or maybe completely detached, and then we have like the panel like next to it, something like that, right? And then maybe, oh yeah, cool, you have a little toolbox here. That is perfect. I love it. Right, and then we add like a little bit of set dressing next to it. Right, but you kind of want to give the feeling that like stuff back here is like super complex and that it is packed with like a bunch of stuff, right? Any advice? Okay. Yeah, let's do some quick little stuff here. But you kind of want to give the feeling that there's just like a bunch of stuff happening back here, right? I don't know, I'm just drawing some random stuff, right? But let's say, oh, we've got like a bunch of server racks, and then this is like a hydraulic fluid situation where there's like a level that you can look at, and there's like, you get the thing that I'm trying to say. There's just like a bunch of stuff happening back here. And then honestly, like a lot of it doesn't need to make sense necessarily, because you can get away with a lot of, yeah, just a lot of greebly looking stuff. But what is really cool about doing stuff like this is that you can have a real contrast between the rest of the scene. And with rest, I mean just like, oh, there's nothing really happening. And then you can have a lot of contrast between like the detailed area. And that has like multiple benefits. It adds like a layer of complexity to the whole scene, making it feel like it's super complex. But also it's going to draw the attention to that area too, which is like really, really beautiful for us, right? Because that's actually what we want to do as well. So yeah. Yep, that's what I would do. Yeah, the rest of the scene is looking, yeah, like I said, way better than before. I love the little scale. I love the little things that you have in mind for it. So yeah, short and sweet, but yeah, cool to see the study you're working on. Also, last thing that I'll say is you've got your person here, right? Keep this scale in mind when it comes to doing this stuff. So like the paneling, for example, let's say we have a panel like this. That means that panel is literally bigger than that person, right? So you would probably expect to potentially have maybe less panels. So right, so this is still a panel that's attached to it, and then maybe there's like a smaller panel up here that was detached. It is stuff like that that's going to help a lot. By just, it's not a huge panel, because then that wouldn't make sense for a person to just lift that up, right, without special equipment. Yeah, just keep thinking about the scale relationship of you as a person being in the ship, and like how you would go about repairing something like this. Because yeah, that is something that also instinctively just makes sense to us, right? Cool. Thank you, David. Thank you for sharing your work. Got a really solid plan laid out. I'm curious to see it coming together. Thanks for the feedback. No worries. Thank you for sharing as well. Cool. McFall, let's have a look. Where is the feedback or your little thread? Because you added some images in here. Super helpful. Super helpful. So thank you so much for doing that. Oh. Yeah, this one is cool. Okay. No, that's the same one. This one is cool. One is interesting. Tops of the Rocks haven't gotten any love yet. That's fine. I'm not particularly fussed about talking about the Tops of the Rocks necessarily. So that is all good. Okay. So a couple of good images here. So I really appreciate it. I think this one is a great example of just like the noise. Just the noise of like the rocks, right? Because, okay, the way that I look at this, we're going to talk about it in relationship to your work, right? Is that you have a couple of like these guys. That is basically our secondary cluster, right? Secondary as in like lots of detail, and then you have like a person like a rock like this, which has like less detail. And this is where honestly the fun begins with like a cluster like this, because rocks are really forgiving, because you can just bash them inside of each other, and you can create clusters that are going to be more detailed than like the individual would be standing by itself, right? So this could be, this cluster of rock could actually not be like one rock, but it could be like multiple rocks just like smashed into each other. And this one is going to be separate as well. But you can kind of see that because sort of like the same same sort of angles are kind of going on, is that it creates like this nice continuous shape, right? Because a rock that does this is not all of a sudden going to be like, oh, I'm going to go this way, right? So it creates like a nice cohesive look to like this rock, which is interestingly enough what you can see happening here, right? You can kind of see where this logic kind of breaks down, because this compares to this feels pretty random. Obviously, in this case, this is literally because of gameplay reasons, right? Because usually the flat rocks, they're meant to be jumpable, so you can get up here. You can probably make your way up here as well. So it's literally done with a purpose. Yeah, ideally you want to kind of keep the continuity of things as well. It's also top down in that one. Yeah, that's Baldur's Gate, right? Yep. It is. So now that brings me back to your little section, is that for the most part, you just have like very similar shapes still, right? And I think in this case, it doesn't really come down to. Let's have a look. It somewhat comes down to the shapes, because you still have a lot of similarities in the shapes and the scale of the shapes going on, right? Where if you look at this guy again, like you can kind of see. Okay. I'm gonna do this very abstract way, right? But we kind of have like a couple of lines here, right? There's not too many. So this is a relatively clean version. Whereas if we start looking at these lines, you kind of see the contrast between the two, right? And that is something that you can then start playing around with in terms of like the density of the shapes that you have. Whereas if we then do the same sort of like a very abstract comparison, even with my little overpaint here, most of these shapes, they're kind of just very similar, right? In terms of like the cadence of them. So there's no irregularity that allows you to like bash stuff into each other and make like really interesting cliffs that have like variation in a bunch of shapes, right? And that literally at this point we have a good base. Now we need to see how we can infuse that with different densities to see what else we can get out of it. Right, so that's literally what we were talking about before as well, like last week, where you have clean modules and then like the busy modules. I think what I forgot to mention there is that, or maybe I did, is that you have a good baseline for your rocks now, which is really good. And now we need to see how we can kind of break that up and potentially make the scattering and the placement of them more interesting as well. And that is where we get into this little section over here. If you have just like this very plateau kind of feeling, that is very unnatural. So you would have to look at how this works in an actual environment and then see how you can integrate the building into it, right? Because what could be really cool is that, for example, okay, I'm gonna do a quick overpaint here. Is that, for example, this building kind of just like naturally goes into the rocks, right? Because to me, like most of these locations, they will try to make the most out of like a flat surface, right? And if you then see a flat surface just present itself like here, that kind of just feels weird. So usually you kind of just want to have something like this happen, where you can just be like, hey, look, what if this just like is built on top of the rock, right? Cool. And then what we can do is then we can start having some fun, right? So okay, we're gonna have like a bit of rock build up here. This is where it becomes interesting, right? And then do the same thing here as well. And now the two things, they kind of start to blend together. Obviously, this might be a bit too high because you kind of imagine that like some of this stuff will be carved into the rock as well. So this monastery that's built on top of it is literally carved out of a piece of the rock as well. This could be really cool. Yeah, that's where references come in, right? It's being like, okay, we're gonna carve this out of rock. Like, how are we're gonna make this look really interesting, really cohesive? And that's where the layers like come back in. So, and that is where now we're no longer talking about like you could do that already with the rocks that you have and kind of do what I'm trying to highlight now is that you can only it needs to go hand in hand with how you use the rocks as well, right? Like you can only make the rocks look so good up until a certain degree, because then it actually goes into like, okay, how do I get better at like actually placing them and making it more natural? And I think we kind of got to that point where we need to focus more on the placement, really push that up to the next level, and then see if we need to then go back to the assets and then redo those again, right? So it's a constant push and pull of, okay, cool, I think these are in a decent state now. Let me see if I can evolve the set dressing. And then, okay, set dressing is really good right now, really happy with it. Now I need to go back and improve the texturing or the generation of my assets, right? But it's that constant back and forth that is going to add a lot of interest to the scene. And then you can do like all this cool stuff where you can you have like slopes and little sections and little natural areas. It's gonna look so good. Let's see. That's Baldur's Gate as well. I honestly think that we got the best examples. I mean, this one is also pretty cool, but it's very specific. I have not seen the video, no. But I can make a lot of quick iterations now as well. Let's have a quick look. Yeah. That is cool. So, okay, then I want you to think about like how you can reuse those quick iteration speeds to your advantage, right? So for example, what I would do with that, it's almost like, okay, I can just like really quickly generate a bunch of stuff. I would honestly just play around with a bunch of shapes, get that into the engine, play around with it, and then do another generation that is well, yeah, this is actually going to answer that question, right? So do another generation where it's like, okay, maybe this one is like less busy, do another generation more busy, and then get all of it until you have the kit that you need to make the thing that you want to make, right? That is honestly what this stuff comes down to. Is you can honestly, I mean, you can definitely go at it like, okay, I want to have a because you can really break this down, right? But like, you're not going to be able to at this point without having the context of what you need to make, right? Because you can be like, okay, I want to do like a big and a small cliff, cool, and then I'm gonna build like a couple of these kind of variations, cool, and then I'm gonna build like a couple of these variations, nice, and then I'm gonna build like a whole bunch of like smaller stuff, and then just like a bunch of pebble groups, right? And this could be your kit. The only way that you figure out what your kit is by playing around. Oh. Okay. Why is it going so slow? Jesus. Loading one document. I'm not loading anything. Ah. Dude, I feel like this version is so buggy. I keep getting crashes as well. Oh my god, my mouse is lagging so bad. What is happening? My PC is not even doing anything. What? Must be. Yeah. You've infected my PC. Oh my god, just look at this. Is it just a mouse? What? Oh. What? That's so weird. Oh, that is so weird. What? This works fine. Once I do it with my mouse, it goes fucking crazy. Yeah, let's try something here. Hey, there we go. Fixed it. Okay, cool. Yeah, so I hope that was helpful, Malta. So, what was the last thing that we talked about? Yeah, it's just about the push and pull about making your kit the way that you need it, right? Because I can throw around like, oh, usually a kit has like I just said, right? Like 2 cliff pieces, 3 big ones, 3 medium, 3 small. But it just depends on what you need, right? It depends on how big the surface is that you're going to be creating. So yeah, I would say keep playing around with it. But I would definitely do a push and pull where you need something like as in set dressing to then be like, oh, okay, this is definitely looking better, because you can only push it so far by only improving the assets. You also need to improve the set dressing and the placement of those assets too at the same time. Otherwise, you're just gonna end running around in circles, right? And at a certain point, you have to be like, hey, look, this is good enough. I'm just gonna use these rocks as is, and that's gonna be my kit. Because okay, this is the worst example that I can ever bring up, but I'm gonna share it really quickly. Let me go to my art station. Let me throw myself under the bus. So in an art station challenge that I did, let's have a look at this. This guy here, huge rock in the back. I got like all this stuff in the foreground as well. So like a bunch of different rocks, right? Nope, it's just 2 rocks. That's it. I just played around with the scale and just played around with the material a little bit. That's it. It's just 2 rocks. I think 2 or 3 rocks. I can't remember. Like I said, don't recommend it, but hey, you can do some cool stuff. Efficient rock usage, yeah. That is also what a good deadline does. If you only get like, I don't know how long these challenges were again, like 1 or 2 months, like, yeah, you don't have the benefit of suspending like, yeah, just a couple of weeks making a rock generator, right? In this case. Q. Thank you for sharing your work, McFall. Amazing example. Oh my god. Don't look at it. Don't use it. Unless, so, okay, you can actually use it, but you need to have a material that supports it. So you can do something really cool where you could have a rock that kind of scales to whatever size you need by making use of, you could potentially do, you could have a low resolution normal map, right, for your bakes, and then the rest of the texture is just a tileable texture added onto it, but it's tri-planar mapped. and it is linked to your object scale. So that if you scale it, it tiles the texture more. If you scale it down, it tiles the texture less, right? That could be an actual use case of doing this sort of stuff. But that comes with its own limitations. Cool. Let's have a look at the next person. So let's go for Nicholas first. Nicholas has 2 questions. The first question was basically, could you give me a visual example of the old filmic look you were suggesting to aim for by bumping up the shadows? It's a great question. And if I had more time, I should actually have done that. Fortunately for prep today, I kind of ran out of time. The best that I could do is... It's not a filmic example. Also, I suck at looking at films, right? But the thing that I was trying to get is that I just want that very subtle amount of contrast, right? So we can kind of see that here, where obviously it's overcast at a different kind of lighting setting, but you have the contrast between like the greens and the blues, right? But like the greens are more upfront, and then the blues are a little bit more subtle, right? So that's why I love this one, for example, especially compared to this one, right? So in here, you can kind of see that the blues are becoming a little bit more dominant. My preference goes out to this one, where the blues are like a little bit more subdued and they're more subtle. It kind of gives like a bit more of a realistic look. But honestly, as I was thinking that, right? So I said like, hey, this is my favorite. But I think the most important question is, what is your favorite, right? That is really what this comes down to. It is your art, and you're gonna have like a personal preference to what you might see, right? So that is the thing that I would focus on. Yeah. So yeah, that is honestly, I don't really have like any better examples when it comes to the old filmic look that I was suggesting last time. So I apologize for that. But I think you gave me like a good backup by just sharing like what is here. And this is probably more what I was talking about. So slight blue in the shadows, so that we're kind of getting away from just the... Let's actually have a look. So that we're kind of getting away from just it being very uniform. Oh, these different aspect ratios? I hope not. Right, so see, that's exactly... I don't know if this even comes out on screen or on stream. Is that this is what it was before, right? It feels very very yellowish, very orange, and very uniform, right? And by doing like a subtle tweak like this, you can kind of make it feel more realistic, because now there's a lot more color contrast, there's a lot more color complexity happening in the scene. And I think that is exactly the sort of thing that I was kind of hoping, because we still get... The scene itself has a lot of warm tones, right? So the scene itself has like a lot of wood, a lot of like very brownish, like orangey materials. So in any sort of scene that has any dominant color, and if it's starting to get like pretty overwhelming, I would look at the color wheel, see what's opposite of that, and try to infuse that into the scene. So that is why I jumped to blue, right? You kind of have like a contrasting color. So you have like the warm and the cold color the same. And I think that worked out perfectly. So any new changes in the scene, specifically what you think about the desaturation I added? Yeah, that's basically what we talked about as well, right? Like, I think the scene is way better. Like I said, this is by far my favorite. But it needs to be yours, right? Like, what is your favorite? Kind of going with that. Yeah, I think the rest of the scene, so we have like a wardrobe in the back, which is looking cool. You can definitely do some cool stuff with like cobwebs and all that kind of stuff still. But yeah, this is coming along like really nicely. Watch out with the stretching on the paintings. Watch out for that stuff. Yeah, stuff is coming along really nicely though. Cool stuff. Thank you so much for sharing your work, Nicholas. And then we're gonna go to Lily next. Oh wait, actually. I don't know if Alejandro is here today. Let's go to Lily. Let's have a look at Lily's work. Great improvements, Lily. Feels way more vibrant than it did. Really cool stuff. I added some more things that you could potentially add. Because your first question was like, oh, I did try to implement all the feedback from last week. Is there anything I'm still missing from last week? I don't think so. I think that's all well and good. And question 2 is there anything more that I could add to this piece to make it more interesting? I added some more plants and flowers, but still feel like it's something is lacking. So a couple more things. I've got like basically 3 suggestions, right? Like 4, let's say. The first one is terrain blending. So have a look at like how terrain blends in these games or in these scenes and how you can improve yours, because this feels like a very boring kind of gradient transition, which is just like not really that interesting to look at. Even if you just vary it up with like a clouds mask or anything like that can help a lot. For example, this example from Jasmine, I just took that from like her art station. You can kind of see that even by just having like a very noise-based transition, right? It can already add like a bit more interest and kind of feel more natural as well. Number 2, grass. I just noticed that you don't have any grass in your scene. And that is gonna help a lot. Again, referencing Jasmine's work, you can kind of see, imagine this scene without the grass, it would not be the same scene, right? Because it adds a lot of really interesting like visual interest, especially around the edges. And also look at like how the transitions here work, where you have like little tufts of grass, and then it kind of goes into like bigger, like more lush kind of sections of grass, right? You can do a lot of really cool stuff by just having grass in your scene and scaling it. Like it could literally be the same grass cluster, but just scaling it can give it like its own unique look. And then yeah, just having like a bunch of like small tufts of grass around the edges, and they get like perpetually like bigger the further you go up, right? That is cool. Not dirt, radiant. Cool. Number 3, skybox. Have a look at what this skybox does. This is one of the more tricky suggestions because skyboxes are not easy. So if you can find one, that would be my recommendation. But it's going to add a lot because right now you have a nice stylized scene, but the clouds feel really realistic, right? So if you can find like a good skybox, that is going to help a lot. I'm actually not sure if you can find like really interesting stylized skyboxes. I'm sure that you can find some. But yeah, I've never had to look for them myself, so yeah, that would be my recommendation. Having like a skybox is going to help a lot in here as well. And then number 4, which is like more of an easy one, but I think it can add a lot, is I just did like a quick little draw over. Just add more flowers, right? Like really make it stand out. Try to make the most out of like the flowers that you have, and really try to drive the contrast between. So what I would do is I would have a look at this space and make that flowers, right? This section is flowers. And then whatever is outside of this section is basically just a gradient towards this space in terms of flowers, right? Because you kind of have like random flowers here, random flowers here. I would honestly have like a gradient that goes from like no flowers to all the flowers inside of the circle. I would even be tempted to have it as like, hey, look, all the flowers are just going to be here inside the circle, and then outside of the circle, we're just going to have like, I don't know, tiny little flowers, but like really play with the scale again, right? I think what could help is that you have like tiny little flowers here, and then around the statue is where the big flowers are. So we're really driving home the contrast between the two spaces, right? Like you're already doing, right? I think we can use that concept and like really drive it up to like 11 and just be like, hey, look, around this statue, all the flowers are going to be big and bulky and it's going to like be really colorful. And then the rest of the scene is kind of just like this gradient that pushes you towards the statue. Yeah. That could be cool. And then, yeah, really play around with the foreground a little bit more, right? I see that you did some stuff, but like you have some like nice bushes that you can kind of use to sort of like soften up like some of these shapes as well. That could be a cool thing to do too. Basically just what I'm trying to do is, you can see that like I want everything to kind of lead towards like the main statue, right? And I'm kind of, whenever I see like a harsh shape in such a beautiful environment, I'm like, I want to fix some of that stuff, right? I want to add like little pebbles underneath it, or maybe like have like a bush here or something like that. I kind of want to soften up those shapes a bit more. And same with this shape here as well, right? It's very harsh, it's very rigid. So I want to see if we can like soften that up. Well, first with the grass, right? Because that's already going to help a lot. And then maybe hide the rest of it with a book. Yeah, here's 4 more suggestions that you can implement to, yeah, really take this to the next level. Yeah, thank you, Lily. Thanks for sharing the updates. Cool stuff. Next one, Power Tail, and then we're gonna go to Darren for the last one. Last 2 for today. Thank you all so much for being here. I really appreciate you all being in the chat. If you're still alive and you're listening, send me your favorite emoji. Let's see. Power Tail to Alejandro. Oh my god. Work got busy this past week, but I managed to slip some time in to finalize an art block out, and therefore I'm ready to take some feedback on this. Okay. Overall, I'm happy with the look, and I'm looking for feedback on the following. Alejandro, you got 4 questions in there. We usually limit this to 2. So, number 1, when it comes to adding art to this, the walls and the streets, how can I maintain visual interest? For a block out, well, I'm just going to read through the questions first, and then we can see if we can condense them. For a block out, what is working in it, and what are some of the early ideas that you tested and throw out? Number 3, is the setting of the location clear? And 4, for future reference, how can I go about asking feedback in the right places or phrase things correctly? Kind of a funny question as I'm here right now trying to do it, but I feel sometimes there's things and feelings in my mind that I can't get specific enough about. Yeah. So on that last question, I don't think you necessarily need to be specific. I would rather have people tell me what they're feeling, and then we can just talk about it, right? Because I know that a lot of art is very, very internal, very emotional, and very, very hard to explain sometimes, right? So if you were to tell me like, hey, I'm kind of feeling that it's not focused, right? I know that that's like a very big, like vague thing to bring up. but that at least gives me something to kind of work with, right? And then we can kind of spin it off of that. For the other questions, let's have a look. For the other questions, when it comes to adding art to this, the walls and the street, etc., how can I maintain visual interest? Well, so I don't think you need to be worried about the walls and the streets and all that kind of stuff. Is you need to think about what you wanna, what the focus needs to be on, and everything else kind of is in service of that, right? So, and that basically comes to, I think it's a question that actually revealing that you need to do more to your block out. Because if you have that question, it feels like a fundamental one. So if you have that question, then we just need to do more work. Because I feel number one is, well, I basically twisted them around here. Hello? I did twist them around here. But with the block out, I want you to go wild. I want you to see more stuff in here. I want you to basically build everything in a very rudimentary way so that we get like 100% understanding of like what is going to be expected in this scene, right? Make just really simple stuff like grass, make really simple cuts out of grass, get those in there, scatter them, right? If you want to have more assets that you want to add in your bar area, add those in. If you want to add more stuff on the floor, like rocks and all that kind of stuff, add those in. The reason why that is helpful is the more that we can get those fundamental questions out of the way, which is literally what a block out is for, the better we build our foundation, right? So if you have a question that is like, oh, how can I maintain visual interest when we're adding stuff to the walls and the street? That just means that we need to add all those things in now so that we can figure out how we can maintain that visual interest before we then spend like lots of weeks developing those assets, right? Because we want to know that now so that if we know that, oh, I don't need that asset, that we're not going to spend time on it. And that's question one. So question two, for a block out, what is working on it and what are some early ideas that you test or throw out? I will say like the block out is good, but like I said, it is still pretty basic. I feel you've done a lot of cool block out work, but most of it is not in the most important area, right? So there's like a lot of cool stuff happening here. There's a lot of interesting stuff happening here, but literally the space that you want to focus on feels relatively simple still. So I feel that we need to really figure that out before we're gonna dive into it. And like I said, what I mean by that is, okay, this area is a train yard, right? So what's gonna be in a train yard? Maybe there's like a big cargo train that's still like stored here, right? Cool. So maybe there's like a big container here still, like on some like wheels, right? And that just acts as like a nice blocker. That is cool. What else are we expecting to see in like this dead end, basically space, right? Maybe what are we going to do with this area, for example? Maybe there's some garbage that has been collecting. Maybe it's like a scrap heap, right? So we have like a bunch of tires, like a bunch of stuff that's just like laying on here. Cool. Maybe we do the same thing here, make a little bit of reuse. And like I said, I'm just coming up with stuff on the fly, right? So this doesn't need to be what you want to do with it, but it could potentially be. And then I think I saw this from, who did this overpaint? Because there was some, I skimmed through it very briefly, but Alex did some cool stuff where he broke up the train tracks. And I think that was actually like a genius idea. You kind of have this sort of stuff happening, right? Where you kind of veer off. You kind of hint at like, hey, look, this is like an old tram depot. Basically what we did last week, right? But I want to see all those elements in, and then we can see if we need to do anything more. Because our main area of interest is still empty. Right? So how are we going to solve that empty space? Which is a question that we really need to figure out now, right? That is what a block out is for. So get all that stuff in and really go wild. You know, like try to get something really cool going. Use a lot of ref. See what they do in like some spaces that are literally in those areas that we would expect, right? And then the third question is the setting of the location clear. It kind of ties into question number 2, right? Where I want to see more of a block out before we can answer that question. Because right now, I don't know yet what's going on, right? I know that it's like, there's a train track, there's like a building next to it, but I don't know how this is used. Like, I don't know if this is like a garbage dump. I don't know if this is like, you know, so we need to do more. We need to do more that is indicative of what this area is going to be. Also, really go wild with some of the set pieces, right? Like if you want this area to stand out, one of the big things that we can do is we can play around with the silhouette and just really be like, okay, you want to have that logo? Let's make the logo like literally a part of the bar, right? Cool. And then because this is a scrapyard, this is all just like scrap sign, right? And now we're tying everything together, right? So this sign over here. Hey, Will. How's it going, buddy? Good to see you. Yeah, so a scrap metal sign, you know, like basically trying to tie the whole thing together and just going a bit more wild with what you're doing, right? I'm on the I'm on the exercise bike right now. That's awesome, dude. You got one at home? Or you're literally at the gym? Oh my god. Fucking good on you, man. You bought one? Hell yeah. I can't wait for that to turn... Well, no, I'm not going to jinx it. Ours, I'll say it like this. Ours turn into like a very expensive like coat hanger after a certain point. But hey, you got this, dude. Yeah, but Alejandro, that's basically the thing that I'll keep it to. So I want to see more, right? I want to see more stuff. I want to see the block out where I can really understand all the elements that are going on in the scene. And at that point, we can then say like, okay, let's go through it like a final time and then go into production, right? So yeah, that's the purpose of a block out. Yeah, fingers crossed. Yeah, dude. Fucking killing it. Yeah, we should honestly get together. Have like a call pretty soon. It's been a while since we caught up, so it would be cool to have a chat. Let's see. So Darren, the last one for today. Let's see. The old dockyards. Will the Whip Wednesday that didn't make it in this week be moved to next week? Yes, it will. Let's see. Yeah, because you... Wait, did your work show up, Swan? No, your work made it in. Oh, I think something might have happened, Swan. Because I know that I looked at your work. Yeah, I know that I got it all in here. Cool. So no, we'll have a look at your stuff later. So yeah, sorry for that. So Darren, Which lighting works best in your opinion? And do you think something crucial is missing? And thank you again for your time and guidance. No worries. I added like a couple of reference images here just to really explain what I meant with like what we talked about before, right? Like that atmosphere that I'm thinking about. And this is what I'm thinking about, right? Like very smog, very congested, like it feels very oppressive, right? And you can see the smog in it as well, which is really cool. And I think for that reason, I honestly prefer this one. Because we're getting like a bit more contrast, right? It's either one of these, honestly, because this one kind of feels like it's almost like it's a Fallout kind of scenario, right? Like super harsh, contrasted lights. It kind of feels more like supernatural almost. So I don't really like that lighting. But yeah, the other two are going along the right direction. But yeah, doing something like this where you can kind of have like fog cards or volumetric fog or also like that. Also, the fog plays a big role in those refs. Could be cool to play around with that in the scene. Yeah, like honestly, these are just to clarify, Will. These are just like references that I added in here, right? So these are not the references from Darren. But I just had we talked about it last week where it would really be cool to see something that is just basically like in this, right? This is basically from Peaky Blinders, and that is basically the picture that I had in my head, and I was like, oh, it would be sick if you can do something like that. But yeah, really playing into that could really be to a benefit. But yeah, I think you did a good job by trying to make like these two areas stand out. I love what you've done with some of the barrels and all the set dressing that you've done on this building. So yeah, great job here. Also the adjustments to the bridge and more the architectural pieces that did a huge improvement to the scene as well. Yeah, great stuff on that, Darren. Fog is always good to help with depth and layering, always working well in the background of the scene. Oh yeah, 100%. 100%. I always love how concept artists kind of do that in their work, where they will use like layering in like a very effective manner, because obviously they don't have the same constraints as us, but I love looking at it. Do you think the lampposts downstairs are needed as they would be on the main street? That is a good point. I don't think they are needed down there. And it could honestly I'm planning on purchasing Easy Fog. That might help. I don't think you need to. If you want to, and if you want to support William, I think that's good. Well, not the William here in chat, but William Voucher. I think that's good, but I don't think you necessarily need to. I feel like making your own volumetric fog is actually pretty simple, and the tools are actually already in the engine. It's not going to look necessarily as good as the one that William did, right? But yeah, I don't think you need to. Just look up a tutorial about local volumetric fog, and that's going to help you a lot as well. It depends on how comfortable you are, right, with the whole material thing. Okay, let's have a look. So more fog, more depth. Well, it's not really fog, it's smog really, right? That's what we're talking about. Maybe the lights would be attached to the wall instead of freestanding. Yeah, that could be. I actually don't know what they do. Maybe in last week's I doubt it though. In last week's events, there might be. So yeah, that would be like a thing to look up, right? . 'Cause, 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 ' So yeah, do we need them there? I don't think so. And also from like just an atmospheric perspective, I think we could really play up the differences in height, right? Where the bottom tier kind of has like this low kind of hanging kind of smog layer down at the bottom. And then you would have like your normal street layer that just has like the street lights, and they kind of have like a different play on the light. I think that could be really interesting for a shot like this, where the bottom kind of is just like fogged up a little bit, right? I'm looking at it from like a very high level. I think they work freestanding, just a bit weird that they're kind of in the way of the stairs a bit. The same with some of the barrels. Yeah, I think if I put my game dev hat on, you know, like this stuff is gonna be like navigation nightmare, because if that is a player character, I mean, do I even need to go into this? Because I feel like in your case, Darren, this might be like useful information later, not necessarily now. What happens in games, this might be a good one for other people out there though. What happens in games is there's a navigation mesh, which is basically a mesh that gets drawn on top of like all the surfaces, and that can decide where a player can walk. What happens is that that's based on the player's metrics though. So let's say this player has these sort of metrics set up. That means that if this space is not wide enough to cover the metrics for the character, it will not generate any nav mesh, which means that you literally cannot get down there. This is literally going to be blocked for you. But also someone working there would probably want to put him in the way from like usability perspective. Yep, that's true as well. Where it's just like, it's annoying that as like a normal dock worker, you kind of have to go down. You kind of have to squeeze in between the lamppost and the barrels as well, right? Yeah. That is very true. Yeah, I think honestly the volumetric effects, they're gonna have like a huge effect on this scene. Yeah. Cool stuff, Darren. Cool stuff. It also depends on the ref. Might be realistic to how it actually was. Yeah, but then even this is a constant argument, right? Like it's like, okay, I have this ref, I want to rebuild it, but then you also have to balance it with what people's perception of things might be, right? Because, for example, I think a lot of people here were looking at this and they were like, oh, it's really cramped down there, and that doesn't really make a lot of sense, especially if you're working it a lot, right? And if that is sort of like the base perception, even if you have a what was I going to say? Even if you have like a more cramped scene down there, then it's still better to err on the side of caution and just clean it up a little bit, even if it's represented in the ref. But yeah, that's a tricky thing. That's always like a balance between the two, right? Like, when do you pick a ref over logic, or opposite, or vice versa? Yeah. Yeah, but I would definitely, for the next steps, just play around with the volumetrics a lot. For sure. Yeah. Good stuff, Darren. Route 1 has given us some suggestions as well, so maybe in the night scene, more bluish tones with the moon. I think, yeah, that could be something to play around with. Even though I do like the very neutral looking scene here, like maybe a smidge of blue could potentially help. I'm honestly thinking about like this tone of blue, right? Like, it's not really blue, it's like blue grayish, and it's just like very desaturated and kind of really playing into the mood, right? Like almost like this kind of color. Yeah. Cool. Thanks, Darren. And then the scene is looking cool though. Interesting vibes with the canals and the bridges. Yeah. Yeah. Done a lot of cool stuff like on the base architecture, right? That we were bringing up. Lots of improvements there. So yeah. Great job, Darren. Last one for today, Swan. Let's have a look. Swan. Yeah, it's weird though. Why are you not in here? Oh, you are. No, it's my bad again. I've made changes to the lighting and the color and was hoping to follow back on with more feedback. I've toned down the temperature of the main light and pushed the gold rays to be higher. Yeah, I think that works out good. It is a bit harsh though, like the gold ray itself. And especially here, right? Like it needs to be like pretty subtle when it comes to this stuff. Yeah, and also, yeah, I think if you just like push it down a little bit and put it at like, I don't know, 25% of its current opacity, I think that's also going to help a lot as well. Yeah. Let's see. And then the second question is, I wanted to know if there's anything in the scene that stands out that could be fixed or could be worked more upon. But I know that you were talking about skirt meshes as well. Yeah. So let's talk about the skirt meshes approach that you were thinking about doing, right? So let me give some context to the people that are watching. There's this image here. Oh, it's a GIF. Let me open up the GIF. Oh, come on. Ooh. So there's this weirdly offset GIF. So this is basically what Swan was talking about, where having a bunch of transitions between like individual meshes to kind of match them better together, right? And then match the vertex color and all that kind of stuff. I honestly don't think you need to do that for this scene. What you can do instead is have just a bunch of like sand piles and kind of just like lean them into the meshes. So for example, I would just have like a mesh. How am I gonna do this? Right, so this is like a pile of sand. I don't know. We did talk about this before, I think. And then what you want to do is mix that in with RVT, so like runtime virtual texturing, so that it seamlessly blends with your landscape, and then you can just literally shove that into like areas that you wanna blend, right? You could have like two piles here. You kind of have like some sand buildup, over here as well, and then also just like some sand buildup here too. Especially in some of those edges, like that's where you kind of want to have like a transition, right? Because we want to soften up like anything that's really harsh. Just doing like stuff like this can help a lot as well. Same principle for the rocks that meet the building as well, I imagined. So for these, wait, let me have a look. For the rocks that meet the building as well, I imagine. I think you already have like some bigger rocks here, right? So you can literally just have like a couple of bigger rocks here. And then have like a sand mesh like next to it, right? To kind of do like a lot of the blending. And it's just like playing around with with a combination of the two that's going to give you the best result, right? And sometimes it's like, okay, it doesn't make sense to have like a stone here, so this is just going to be like sand, right? And then for example here you could do like a combination again where you have a bunch of sand and then maybe there's like a rock or two just sticking out of it again. Because I think the beauty comes from layering those things together. That's where you're gonna see like everything coming together like quite nicely, right? I've been using the skirts to help blend the rock cliff that made contact with the building. Yeah, I mean I see that, and I think it's a good approach here. The only thing why I'm not a fan of like skirt meshes like this is because they're freaking annoying. I think the way that you use them actually, Swan, is actually the best way of using them because there's no... It's very tricky to get like a wall, like a natural wall, to look really good by blending with like an architectural wall. So in your case, I actually think that this is probably the best use case for them, but they're just freaking annoying to set up. This needs to be very specific. Yeah, for most of that stuff in let's say you're addressing an open world, like usually this kind of stuff comes down, for example, this, right? Like your rocks, that comes down to RVT blending. It's actually a good question, Will. So one thing that I would want to know is, why is the door rectangular and the door stone is a circle? That is a great question. It's I think it has to do with, you know like when you were a kid, you know, they do this like whole test where you like try to get the square peg into like the circle and all that kind of stuff. This is just like the same thing, but just like on a massive scale and a different civilization, you know? That's the way that I'm thinking about it. It is a good question though. And I honestly wish that I asked that question before. Because I should have. Okay. Yeah. It still does work, right? Can you link to that breakdown? Searching skirt meshes on ArtStation didn't work out. Let me see if I can find something. Skirt. Oh, Raul Aparicio. Let's have a look. Now we just need to find which one. There's also a way in the shader to blend rocks instead of using skirts. Yeah. That's the RVT technique that we were talking about. The runtime virtual texturing that allows you, well, it allows you to blend anything with a landscape. So, I mean, there are ways. I'll see you soon. Hey, thanks, Will, for popping in. Awesome. And keep up the treadmilling, dude. I like the cycling. Doing good on that. I should honestly do more of that too. We'll talk soon. Pixel depth also could work. Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing. You can also do a dither fade. Like you can literally just do like a dither with opacity, and that might also work. There's so many ways of like blending them together. But you got the skirt meshes already. I would not change it up anymore, you know? I think it's there now. It's fine. It works. Let me see. I'm currently having a look through Raul's work. Just see if I can find something. So much cool stuff. Huh. Don't seem to find it. It's not on his God of War stuff anymore. Oh. No. Whatever. Whatever. Let's see. Yeah, I remember a breakdown of that. Anyway. Yeah. I would say that skirt meshes are not that common. It's a technique, right? And you can use it. But yeah, there's definitely other ways of doing it. Usually, honestly, these days, it's just like smashing geo into other geo, right? Like, because it's so high resolution geo, that we don't tend to do a lot of this stuff anymore. Yeah. Cool. Let's see. Was there anything else, Swan? Let me just double check before we round this session off. Wanted to know if there's anything else that stands out. I feel like we talked about a lot of it with like the sand piles and stuff, right? Like, to me, now it's a time to just like really go crazy with the set dressing, really think about like putting like all the small little things together and like blend everything together properly, right? So for the rocks, that would be RVT. For the door and the architectural meshes, that would be sand piles and RVT, like a combination of the two. And I think once we did that, then everything is going to be good. So yeah, thank you, Swan. Let's see what else has been said in the chat. Let me switch over to camera. Probably round off this session. I know it may be a bit more in effect, but maybe add something like a key or a mechanic to the tomb door, like a puzzle like Indiana Jones. But I think you'll have to reshape the door frame. Yeah, it's cool stuff, right? But it's a bit too late for those suggestions. But hey, Swan can do whatever he wants with that, right? Yeah, the skirt mesh is an interesting technique. It is I think Naughty Dog might still use it in specific cases, but it is, yeah, unless you have like a tool for it set up, it's usually like very manually intensive, you know, just to get it set up. Okay, cool. We ran out of time, unfortunately, people. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for everyone who participated in this session. If you want to participate yourself, there's a link down in the description below. Yeah, it was like fun having a chat in the beginning as well. Like, I feel like, yeah, just having a chat in the beginning is a good way to get into things. So I had a lot of fun with that as well. My whip should be next week. Don't worry about it, Tim. Yeah, let's go, Route 1. Looking forward to seeing it. Yeah, without further ado, thanks everyone for being here. I will see you next week. Yeah, because I'll be going back to Belgium this weekend. So bye everyone. Have a good evening.